Here's something that should stop you cold. You've probably typed something like this into an AI tool. Act as an expert consultant, or you are a world-class data scientist. It feels logical, right? You're setting the stage, telling the AI who it's supposed to be. And conventional wisdom says that should unlock some deeper level of intelligence. But here is the uncomfortable truth, backed by hard research data. On logic tasks, zero measurable improvement. On mathematics, zero measurable improvement. On coding accuracy, you guessed it, zero. And in some specific cases, telling an AI to act as an expert can actually hurt its performance by up to 5%. 5% worse from a prompt that half the internet swears by. So what's actually going on under the hood? And if role prompting isn't doing what we think it's doing, when does it work and why? That's exactly what we're unpacking today. Welcome to Mindcast, the show where we take the most interesting, most consequential ideas from research, technology, and human behavior and make them genuinely useful for your life and your work. I'm your host, Will. Today, we are pulling apart one of the most widely used and most widely misunderstood techniques in AI prompting. It's called role prompting. That's the practice of assigning a persona or professional identity to an AI model before you give it a task. Act as a senior financial analyst. You are a Harvard-trained physician. Respond as a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. Sound familiar? The assumption baked into all of that is that giving the AI a prestigious identity makes it smarter, more accurate, and more reliable. But the research tells a far more nuanced and, frankly, more interesting story. Based on an internal research report titled The Mechanics, Efficacy, and Ambiguity of Role Prompting in Large Language Models, we now have some of the clearest data yet on exactly what's happening when you do this, and the findings are going to reshape how you think about working with AI. By the time we're done, you will know exactly when AI personas genuinely work, when they silently backfire, and most importantly, how to build prompts that are actually measurably powerful. Let's get into it. Key insight number 1, and I'm calling this one the illusion of expertise. Let's start with the most fundamental question. What does an AI actually do when you tell it to be an expert? Because the answer isn't what most people assume, and understanding it changes everything. Here's the mental model you probably carry. You think of the AI as a kind of dormant intelligence, and your role prompt is like a key that unlocks a specific department. You say, act as a cardiologist, and suddenly the AI routes your question through its medical knowledge and gives you a cardiologist-grade answer. That is not what's happening, not even close. The more accurate picture comes from what researchers call the simulator-simulacra framework. Think of the AI as an extraordinarily sophisticated pattern completion engine. It has absorbed a vast volume of human-generated text, papers, blogs, books, forums, manuals, transcripts. Cardiologists write in certain ways, use certain vocabulary and hedging patterns. The AI doesn't become a cardiologist. It generates text that statistically resembles what a cardiologist would produce. Technically, researchers describe this in terms of persona vectors, directional coordinates in the model's latent activation space. The role prompt nudges outputs toward a particular cluster of stylistic and tonal patterns. It's a behavioral steering mechanism. It is not a cognitive accelerator. That distinction is everything.
So what does role prompting actually change, measurably? The research breaks this down across several metrics, and the results are genuinely fascinating. On the plus side, domain depth goes up. The output sounds more like a specialist wrote it. Risk communication improves. The AI is more likely to flag caveats and edge cases the way a professional would. Those are real, meaningful benefits. But here's the trade-off that almost nobody talks about. Clarity goes down. Verbosity goes up, and not by a small margin. Role-prompted outputs are, on average, 15 to 50% longer than baseline outputs for the same question. And along with that extra length comes more hedging, more qualifications, more it depends, more caveats layered on top of caveats. Think about what that means in practice. You ask for a quick summary, give it an expert persona, and instead of a crisp 2-paragraph answer, you get a 500-word treatise that sounds impressively authoritative but buries the actual answer under professional-sounding verbiage. You walked away thinking the persona made the output better. But did it, really? Or did it just make the output longer? And for logic? For math? For code? The persona actually interferes. The model shifts resources toward stylistic pattern matching, toward sounding like an expert, at the cost of pure computational accuracy. That's why we see those negative performance deltas. The persona is doing real work, just not the work you wanted. This brings us to key insight number 2, persona drift and the stereotype problem. 2 hidden failure modes that can quietly sabotage your work, and most people have absolutely no idea they're happening. Let's start with persona drift. You open a new AI conversation, set up a beautifully crafted role prompt, and at first, everything seems great. But here's what the research shows happens next, systematically across extended conversations. In turns 1 through 5, the AI maintains strong alignment with your persona. It's fresh, it's anchored. From turns 6 through 15, erosion begins. The vocabulary of the persona fades, the total commitments loosen. You might not even notice. The outputs still seem good, but the persona is quietly hollowing out. And beyond turn 16, the research is stark. You often see full reversion. The persona you spent time crafting is essentially gone. The AI is now responding like a generic, helpful assistant. Why? Because AI models don't hold a role the way humans do. Every token generated shifts the probability distribution slightly. Over a long enough conversation, the cumulative weight of the dialogue overwhelms the initial instruction. Your persona prompt gets functionally diluted. Now for the second hidden failure mode. And this one touches on bias and reliability with real consequences. I'm talking about stereotype activation. Remember how AI models learn role definitions from statistical co-occurrence in text data, not from formal professional taxonomies? This has a deeply uncomfortable implication. When you write, "act as a financial advisor," the model isn't pulling from some neutral, professionally defined description of what financial advisors do. It's pulling from every piece of text on the internet that mentions financial advisors, including popular culture, media portrayals, Reddit threads, and yes, demographic stereotypes. The practical result? A simple job title prompt can inadvertently activate cultural biases and hyper-optimistic personas. The expert you summoned might be statistically skewed toward a particular communication style or archetype that doesn't match the nuanced reality of the profession. The AI isn't doing this maliciously, it's just doing math. But the output can reflect assumptions you never intended. You might think you're getting expertise when you're actually getting a culturally filtered caricature of expertise. And because it sounds authoritative and uses the right vocabulary, it's very easy to mistake that caricature for the real thing. This is one of the most compelling arguments for specificity in your prompts, which brings us perfectly to key insight number 3. Key insight number 3, and this is where the abstract becomes concrete. I'm calling this one the $50 million proof. The research includes a case study that is the single most powerful illustration of everything we've been discussing. It involves a real-world scenario, a $50 million mergers and acquisitions decision about a health tech company acquisition, testing 3 different levels of prompting on the exact same task. Level 1 is the generic prompt, something like, "act as a business expert and analyze this acquisition." The output is, and this is the word the researchers use, buzzword soup. You get strategic synergies, value creation opportunities, market positioning advantages. It all sounds plausible. It's completely useless as an actual decision-making tool. There's no specificity, no actionable insight, no identification of real risk.
Level 2 is the specific title prompt. Act as a mergers and acquisitions attorney specializing in technology companies. Better, noticeably better. The output engages with deal structure, due diligence considerations, and integration risk. But here's where it fails, and this failure could cost you millions. It misses HIPAA compliance exposure. It doesn't surface technical debt risk, two of the most critical risk vectors in any health tech acquisition, completely absent, because M&A attorney is still too generic a frame. It doesn't tell the AI what specific context it's operating in, what constraints matter, or what the boundaries of the analysis should be. Now, level 3. This is where it gets remarkable. The fully contextualized prompt introduces a framework the researchers call RTCCB, which we'll unpack properly in a moment, and it changes everything about the output. The AI is given a specific role, a clearly defined task, rich contextual information about the health tech company and the deal structure, explicit constraints about what matters in this regulatory environment, and clear boundaries on what the analysis should and shouldn't include. The output that comes back is a different class of document entirely. It immediately flags HIPAA compliance exposure as a primary risk. It identifies legacy infrastructure issues and quantifies the technical debt at approximately $1.5 million, recommending a corresponding deduction from the acquisition price. And then, and this is the detail that demonstrates genuine analytical depth, it recommends a $5 million escrow holdback as protection against undisclosed liabilities that could emerge post-closing. That is the difference between a prompt that merely sounds expert and a prompt that is expert. On a $50 million deal, that $5 million escrow recommendation alone could mean the difference between a successful acquisition and a catastrophic one. The prompt didn't just change the tone of the output, it changed its entire utility. This is what specificity unlocks, and this is why the framework matters so much. So let's bring all of this together. The illusion of expertise, persona drift and the stereotype problem, the $50 million proof. What should you actually do differently starting today? 3 concrete, actionable takeaways. Let's go through them one by one. Takeaway number 1. Match your prompt strategy to your task type. Role prompting is not a universal upgrade. It is a specialized tool with a specific best use case profile. For tasks involving logic, mathematics, coding, and structured reasoning, where accuracy is the primary goal, role prompting is at best neutral and at worst counterproductive. For those tasks, research consistently shows that chain of thought prompting, where you ask the model to think step by step or reason through this systematically, outperforms persona-based approaches every single time. But for tasks involving style, tone, advisory judgment, domain vocabulary, or professional framing, for communication tasks, content tasks, strategic advisory tasks, role prompting absolutely has a place. The key is knowing which category your task falls into before you write a single word of your prompt. Ask yourself, am I trying to get a correct answer, or am I trying to frame a response appropriately? The first calls for chain of thought. The second calls for a well-crafted persona. Getting this distinction right is the single biggest leverage point in improving your AI output quality. Takeaway number 2. Always use contextualized roles, never just job titles. Here is where the RTCCB framework comes in. RTCCB, 5 components. R is for role, not just a job title, but a role that includes relevant background and specialization. Not act as a lawyer, but act as a corporate attorney with 15 years of experience in technology sector M&A transactions. T is for task. Define exactly what you need produced. Not analyze this, that's too vague. Produce a risk assessment that identifies the top 3 legal vulnerabilities and recommends specific mitigation strategies for each.
C is for context, the big one most people skip entirely. Give the AI the situational information it needs: the industry, the regulatory environment, the stage of the project, the audience for the output. More context means a narrower statistical space and a more precise, useful output. C is for constraints, what must be included, what format, length, or tone is required. Constraints aren't limitations, they're guides that help the model allocate its attention appropriately. And B is for boundaries, what's out of scope, what should the AI explicitly not do or include. Boundaries are the guardrails that prevent the model from drifting into adjacent territory that sounds relevant but isn't what you need. RTCCB: role, task, context, constraints, boundaries. Write it on a sticky note. Use it every time you prompt an AI for anything that matters.
Takeaway number 3. Build in drift mitigation for any conversation that goes beyond a handful of exchanges. Most people don't know persona drift is happening. They set their persona at the start, have a 15-turn back and forth, and assume the AI is still operating within the original frame when it's actually reverted to default behavior. The output still seems fine, so the degradation goes unnoticed, but the specialized value of the persona you crafted is quietly gone. The solution is what researchers call periodic re-anchoring. Every 5 to 7 turns in an extended conversation, restate your role context. You don't need your entire original prompt. A concise 1 or 2 sentence reminder is often enough. Something like, "Remember, you are approaching this from the perspective of a regulatory compliance specialist in the EU healthcare sector. With that framing in mind, let's continue." That re-anchoring resets the drift clock. For high-stakes, long-running workflows, the research also points to memory frameworks, where key contextual anchors are periodically injected into the conversation. The principle is simple. Don't assume the AI remembers who it's supposed to be. Tell it again. Maintaining persona consistency is your responsibility as the prompter, not the AI's. Build that maintenance into your workflow from the start.
So here's where we land. Role prompting is real. It works, but it works in very specific ways for very specific task types and only when executed with genuine precision and intentionality. The naive version, dropping a job title into a prompt and expecting elevated intelligence, isn't just ineffective. It can actively mislead you, producing outputs that sound impressively authoritative while quietly underperforming where it counts. The sophisticated version, using RTCCB to build fully contextualized, boundary-aware persona prompts, matching your strategy to your task type, and actively managing persona drift, can produce outputs that are genuinely transformative. The $50 million case study isn't a hypothetical. It's a demonstration of what's possible when you treat prompt engineering as a craft rather than a shortcut. The research this episode is based on is an internal report and is not publicly available. What I've brought you today is my synthesis of its key findings, framed for practical application. Further reading and resources will be linked in the show notes. Here's my challenge to you. Take one AI task you do regularly, run it through the RTCCB framework, and compare the output to what you usually get. Share what you discover through the contact details in the show notes. If you got value from this episode, and I hope you did, the single best thing you can do is subscribe to Mindcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. Every subscription helps us keep producing independent, research-driven content that doesn't talk down to you. And if you have a moment, leaving a review makes an enormous difference. It helps other curious people find the show, and it genuinely means a lot to everyone who puts this thing together. I'm Will. This has been Mindcast. Stay curious, stay precise, and I'll see you in the next one.